Let's bring in our panel. Matt Schlapp, contributor with The Hill, Bloomberg News White House reporter Jennifer Jacobs, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Charles, to you first. With the Russians drawing lines in the air like this, are we in a new Cold War?
Well, we've been in a new Cold War ever since Putin came into power, but it's not exactly at the same level of risk as the old Cold War. The Russians are very careful. They made a similar announcement after we did the Tomahawk attack with the cruise missiles that they would cut off communications. It didn't happen. In the soundbite you showed of Lavrov, the foreign minister, speaking, he was conciliatory, saying, I hope the communication continues. So it sounds as if there's a lot of bark here coming out of the defense ministry from Moscow, because they have to show, the Russians have to show the Syrians, we are your patrons, we're not going to stand by. But the larger picture is all this maneuvering is about the post-ISIS Syria. They both assume ISIS is going to be wiped away fairly soon. And the question is, will Assad be able to restore, with the Russians and the Iranians, full control over the country, including the part that is now ISIS? Or will that be a kind of semi-independent rebel territory, and Assad regime will be kind of a mini-state? That's what this maneuvering is about. I don't expect that we're going to have a conflict with the Russians, but we are going to have a long tussle on the ground with the forces who support Assad, the forces who are against, taking over in the absence of ISIS within a few months.
I don't think we're going to have an answer to the question you posed about what a post-ISIS Syria will look like. Jennifer, for all the talk about alleged collusion between President Trump and the Russians, the president has taken some hard lines with the Kremlin, including the shoot-down of the Syrian jet that we saw. Obama-era sanctions on Russia following its annexation of Crimea have remained in place. And, of course, there have been some sharp words of condemnation for Russia's support of the Assad regime, particularly in the wake of that deadly chemical attack in April.
Today morning, we awoke to pictures, to children foaming at the mouth, suffering convulsions. How many more children have to die before Russia cares?
So, Jennifer, is this what anyone would have imagined that the U.S.-Russian relationship would look like back on Inauguration Day?
Oh, my goodness. Well, there already have been some people who have called out, this action as a way for Trump to distract from some of his past comments that have been very generous to Russia. I do not think that that's the case, that Trump is trying to distract from this. Obviously, there have been provocations by the pro-Assad regime coalition forces several over the last few weeks. The big theme around the White House today was de-escalation, talking about how they have not wanted to see this escalate. They do not want to see this escalate, downplaying this quite a bit, talking about how they're going to keep open lines of communication with Russia. The thinking today was, listen, Russia had, threatened to cancel that deconfliction agreement to prevent those mid-air collisions once before, back when Trump said the Tomahawk missiles as the retaliation for the chemical strikes. But then, that agreement is still in place. They're again threatening to cancel that, but they're thinking that things are going to be able to be smoothed over. There's a very calm, unified voice right now.
Bottom line, Russia doesn't seem to be getting all it wants, or even most of what it wants, from the Trump presidency so far, correct?
Exactly, yeah.
All right, so we also have the continuing story about the investigation into alleged contacts with the Russians, and there was a fascinating exchange on Fox News Sunday between our own Chris Wallace and one of the newer members of the Trump defense team, attorney Jay Sekulow.
And now he's being investigated by the Department of Justice, because the special counsel, under the special counsel regulations, reports still to the Department of Justice, not an independent counsel. So he's being investigated for taking the action that the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General recommended him to take.
You stated some facts. First of all, you've now said that he is being investigated after saying that you didn't.
No.
You just said,
no, he's
sir,
not being investigated.
You just said that he's being investigated.
No, Chris, I said that let me be crystal clear so you completely understand. We have not received, nor are we aware of any investigation of the President of the United States.
Sir, you just said.
Period.
Matt Schlapp, was that crystal clear for you?
I would like to define some terms. We keep talking about whether or not the president's being investigated or not. It's pretty loose. The fact is that Team Trump is involved in this investigation to see whether or not there's collusion between his former campaign and the Russians. So that's the first step. So people get confused and say, oh, that means Donald Trump is a target of the investigation. Is he a target or not? Now, we have this loose leak that has come out of the Washington Post saying, once again, the inference is Donald Trump is a target of the investigation.
Not for collusion, but for something else, correct? Which was
firing Comey and obstruction of justice.
Obstruction of justice.
That's right. So this is, but here's what we all have to kind of take a breath on. I don't want to hear about any of this until we actually hear from the counsel, until Jay Sekulow hears from the office of the special counsel about who is a target and who is not a target. So all the hyperventilating over this, I think, is a big mistake. And I think as far as Jay's appearances on the Sunday shows, I think the point was made over and over and over again, which is, hey, he's not a target. We haven't been notified that he's a target, and the wider investigation continues.
And very quickly, 10 seconds for this, Matt. Do you regard that this president is in trouble?
Well, look, they're going to find something. There's no question that there's going to be something. There's not nothing to this, but there's nothing major to it, and there's no collusion with the Russians, with Trump's involvement with collusion with the Russians. That whole issue, even the Democrats are letting that go. They're moving on to other topics.
All right, panelists.